I'm Paul from Karas Pen Co.
And I'm Dan from Karas Pen Co.
And today we're going to talk to you about the Decograph. In a series of videos, the first of which you're currently watching, we're going to take you through the entire process that we went through with the Decograph. And this process isn't just for this pen. Some of it's unique to this pen, but we really want to give you guys an idea of how we go about designing and manufacturing, prototyping, whatever it may be, every single step in our process that we go through. We've never done anything like this before, so this video is basically going to give you an idea as if you stepped in the shop during the different periods of time when we're walking through a new pen. This is going to kind of sum all that up as best we can in 2 or 3 videos to give you an idea of just the entire process. It's something that we go through with all of our pens. An idea might be something that we get back, we get it through feedback. We have an idea that we land on, we draw something on a napkin, whatever it may be. Something might pop out at us that we then decide to take and use it in the process of designing a pen or any of the products that we've released in the past. And so we hope that this will give you guys some clarity. We hope that these videos will basically take you on a journey through that. Hopefully it won't be too boring for you. And that really, by the end of it, you'll have some understanding about the process that we use, what it looks like to machine a pen from start to finish, and really the intricacies that go into it from day one until it's released and you can purchase it. And with that, so we're gonna get all that started with basically the idea behind this pen in particular, and where that came from. So we're going to talk about that in relation to Dan. Dan's the one that designed this pen. He's designed all of our pens. Dan has a degree from Arizona State University in industrial design, if you didn't know that or were unaware of that. A lot of businesses like ours, machine shops or pen manufacturers, kind of the size that we are, don't have that to rely on. And it's allowed us to really have some insight from a different perspective, from a perspective that you would normally see with a large design firm. Really, like it gives us another lens to create product through. And so Dan's going to explain to you really like where the idea for this pen initially came from, and then I'll give you some insight into how I was involved in the beginning of that pen, and then we'll go from there. So Dan, if you want to give us some ideas on how this pen came about.
So and traditionally, when you design something, industrial designers do, is you start with, you do things like research. You look at what's currently out there. In our case, we've luckily been in the business for a few years and been to pen shows and talked, people. So we had some reference in that point. But then you move on to things like form development, which includes sketching and which I do a lot of at my desk. I'll be doing something, checking email, and I'll get an idea, and I'll sit down and I'll actually physically draw out those ideas to develop a visual language, or to work out engineering aspects or things like that. But then you move forward and take those ideas, distill them down to what you finally want to do, move it into 3D modeling, then from 3D modeling, like a program like SolidWorks, where it's a virtual object on screen to check all your engineering stuff to see if your designs actually work on paper, because you can draw a lot of pretty pictures that won't work. I have a whole bunch of those. And then you can take it to like 3D printing for physical prototyping, and then ultimately to prototypes, like actual production prototypes. So machining and some products require molding or stamping, but ours are all machined and has some stamping. So. But for this pen, it all started a few years ago when we first launched the ink, which was a Kickstarter project that we did previously, and we still sell. But as soon as I started getting into the market, people started asking questions. Well, what about this? What about this? What can it post? What make it lighter, or different things. So ultimately, I started working on different variations of that existing pen to make the engineering changes very minimal for us as a manufacturer, to keep the costs down and everything else. But we moved forward and eventually had 3 different versions. This was several years ago, a process before you started even working for us, and moved to the point where we had 3 designs that we wanted to explore, this being the latest one. So we took the designs and 3D modeled them in full and spec'd them all out and blueprinted them, and then moved to the point of 3D modeling and 3D printing. So this pen is the first pen that we've ever prototyped completely using 3D modeling, or 3D printing rather.
Yeah.
So we use a service that's that we contract with, that we give them the files from the computer that are virtual, and then they turn them into a physical object. I have the prototype here. There'll be some better photos you're probably looking at right now. So the completed pen in size, shape, and form is pretty much identical, except these are made out of materials that can be printed using a machine that creates something from nothing, except a digital file. Yeah. So we were able to decide whether or not it was what we wanted, and it was, so we moved forward. The design process usually requires changes, engineering changes. In our case, we saw some potential issues that we corrected after this initial prototype. The material was a little bit different than anything we'd worked with before. It's a thermoplastic. It's regular cast acrylic, and it provides its own challenges because its mechanical properties are inherently different than any kind of metals, being copper, brass, or aluminum, which we typically use.
Yeah, and so some of the things that we kind of I don't want to say run into, but some of the things that we, even when I came on, had to deal with was you had the idea, as you mentioned, of kind of adapting the ink to potentially utilize non-metal pieces.
Yep.
But really, as we sat down and kind of talked through that process and worked through that process, it became something that wasn't necessarily, we didn't necessarily know that we were going to be able to do.
Yeah.
Partly because of the way that the ink is made, even the Render K Fountain K pen, because there's certain aspects in that just don't translate to non-metal.
Oh yeah.
With screws, with small fasteners and stuff like that, it's just not something that you can do with an element like this.
So the ink was a departure from our normal clip,
right?
Which is a stamped clip that uses 2 fasteners to hold it onto the cap. Then the ink had a different design that we went with, a little more industrial, that wouldn't work with this material, but also the aesthetic wouldn't go with what we were going for.
Right.
So this clip is a hybrid of stainless spring steel and a machined aluminum element, right, which are permanently mechanically attached to each other. So you get a lightweight, strong clip that has a completely different look and feel than something that's stamped or molded.
Right. And one of the things when we set out, when I came on just over 2 years ago, one of the things that I had talked about was kind of similar with what you had wanted to do was, to try to transition some of the pens into doing some mixed materials. And it really just never kind of came about, which is why when we sat down to look at this, we knew when we sat down to do something like this that it was probably going to have to be a pen that was designed from the ground up around the materials.
Yeah,
a little bit more.
So one of the things that you run into is with a new material is the manufacturing process has become a little bit different. And if you have to start making changes beyond I would say like a low percentage, you might as well start from scratch.
Right. So
that's kind of, it was good because I wanted the opportunity to design something completely new. So getting the okay to, this sounds like a whole new pen. Let's just make a whole new pen.
Right.
As a designer is an exciting thing because you get to design. So we tried to keep our aesthetic similar, and hopefully people will see that. But when you have the freedom to completely change and not base something on the past, it allows you to explore alternatives that you wouldn't have the option to do otherwise.
Absolutely. And really kind of that process, I have the benefit of kind of, while I'm not a designer or anything, I'm heavily involved in pens. I just love pens. I use them more than I try to use them more than I use computers. All my notes are done in pen, and so I have the opportunity to kind of we work together in the same office, and so he'll be designing certain aspects, and he'll bounce ideas off of me. And as he kind of went through the design process.
No. To be fair, it was we. So I'm going to interject here. He is a resource, and this wasn't just me designing in a vacuum. He has a whiteboard that's near his desk, and I will jump up and draw on the whiteboard and work through ideas. And because of his knowledge of pens and the fact that he uses fountain pens more regularly than I do, I rarely use them, which people are going to freak out about, I'm sure. But I use a lot of different things, so nothing gets used that much. But fountain pens are low on my rotation. His ability to contribute to the design process is invaluable, because if I was designing in a bubble by myself, we'd have a completely different result.
Right.
So now that I interrupted him, that's kind of how part of it worked. So
to give you guys an idea, we look at a lot of different things, both of us do, together, separately. It's one of those things that when we, specific to this pen, this is kind of the first pen that I really had any kind of major input in. We really sat down on the weekends. If an idea came to me, I'd jot it down or send him a text. It was kind of one of those things where, we looked at a lot of different things, and just really, we wanted to make something that was definitely, you could definitely tell that it was a Karas product, but at the same time, it used some common design features that you might see in pens that were around in the 30s and 40s, that would kind of be an homage to those, which is why we did some things with finial work and a clip capture system that alludes to some pens that were very popular in the 30s, but then kind of made it, because of the motifs that you and Bill and even I are really drawn to. We wanted it to be a very not minimalist, but the lines that it has are there for a purpose, and they're there to make draw the eye to it and make it look like there's some movement and some grace to it and some elegance. Not just it's like a stick that you can unscrew one part of and there's a piece that you happen to be able to write with. So there was a lot of work that went into making sure that while it seems like it's a relatively stripped down piece, it's not really, if you
it was intentional.
It was intentional, yes. But it's really not that stripped down. There's gentle curves and then that move into sharp tapers, but they're very nuanced. Chamfers in certain places, design elements that we took from stuff that you would see in Art Deco architecture, and elements that were used in pen design in the 30s and 40s, but also used in automobile manufacturing and stuff and automobile design. So we drew on a lot of different elements, both of us, and then Bill Karas as well, when we sat down to go through, walking through this process to make a product that was really very unique, but at the same time, heavily inspired by a lot of traditional history and design and elements like that. So, the final product is what you have. And so when we walk through the manufacturing process, we'll kind of explain some of those things a little bit more. I want to kind of wrap up with, as we went through this process, there was a long process. We probably took 3 months to name the pen, which maybe you think that, well, that's nothing, or that's a lot for us. Like normally we don't take that.
It's
long.
a half a day or something.
Yeah, usually it's
Right.
just us banging out a bunch of names, which may be why people are like, yeah, of course, you have a pen that's named ink and it takes ink, and it's really confusing.
That's my fault.
And some pens are, are named the way that they're named for specific reasons. The render case specifically is named for a reason that is.
So yeah, the render K was named because in the industrial design world, when you draw something, you render it, and the K obviously for Karas.
Right.
So it just kind of happened, and it's kind of an odd name, but
it works very well for the pen,
yeah.
and it does what it's supposed to for that pen. With this pen, there's some elements with the naming of this pen where, like, we had pages and pages and whiteboards, and if you
easily 100.
If you talk to some of the people that are frequently some of our tester people, some people that we bounce ideas off, we ask for suggestions, and they got super frustrated with us because none of the three of us would land on the same name that they suggested, and when it really came down to it, we kind of narrowed the focus down to, we wanted the name to also kind of be a traditional type name. And frequently one of the things that you see in design and manufacturing and naming in mid-century America is this idea that they would take two words that weren't necessarily, you would not necessarily see them combined, and then they would smash them together.
Yeah, it was a compound word of sorts.
Basically, They would make something new up. And that's what this pen is. This pen is our use, there's Art Deco design in the design. And so we took the deco portion of that, and then we've always kind of, one of the things that you've always landed on, and I've always felt like too, is that the pen kind of has, we add like a naming or element that's writing or
practical
use.
Because the render K,
yes,
that was the act of using it for rendering,
and the ink obviously is because
right.
it holds ink. So. And it's retractable tipped pen.
Sure.
And the decograph, the graph portion of it, graphing is, you use traditional graphing is something that you use a pen with.
Well, and the word graph, if you look it up, it means to write.
Yes. So
it's directly, it's a root word,
It is.
So decograph was born, and to our very happy surprise, it was
all three. Everybody that heard it really kind of liked it. So I think that was actually in the parking lot. We were leaving at the day for work, still tossing names back and forth while you walked to your car and I walked to my car. You said Deco something and I said something else. And then when we came to work the next morning, we kind of melded the two together and came up with that. So it was very fortuitous. And it wasn't something that we did to pull off of other names of items or whatever. It was
you might hear, for that very reason, you might hear other pens that have some of those bits and pieces in them.
Absolutely. They've been used throughout. I mean, manufacturers from the 1800s. One of the original pens in the 1800s used the graph in its, and it's still a popular pen that you can get now. So. It's not.
We're not trying to rip off or buy off somebody's branding. It
was 3 months worth of tossing stuff back and forth to land on this.
Do yourself a favor. Write yourself a list of names you think would be cool for pens, and then Google those names, and they will already exist as pens.
They will. It's true. They really will. And that's one of the other things is we wanted to use a name that hadn't been used for a pen, and it had ideally not been used for really anything else when we made this pen. So. Lastly, we're gonna finish on this, and this is kind of the exciting part. We've been alluding to this in most of our videos. We can't really show you a video yet because we're waiting for pieces to fall into place. Well, this is the piece that's fallen into place. When everybody kind of is used to our packaging that we ship our current products in, it's our design completely from bottom to top. It's what we wanted to do. We wanted to do this type of cardboard, recycled cardboard with minimal graphics on it, but that really spoke to our style. And it works very well with the metal pens and really is what we wanted it to do. When we designed the Decograph and really started going through the process of manufacturing this pen and going through the process of looking at it, we knew that it was going to be a step in a different direction for us on many different reasons. And so we started the process of sourcing different packaging, and that was another several months worth of looking at, bringing in people that worked in traditional packaging companies.
Boxes, cardboard tubes. We
custom
looked at
made inserts,
sewn goods. You name it.
leather goods. Yeah,
we looked at everything,
and we had many people that sat by that we had. They would bring us prototypes, or they would bring us. We would give them specs, and they would basically, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. They would look at different things.
Nothing really kind of felt right.
Seemed to work.
Yeah,
for
so
us.
That would just get shelved, and we'd keep working. We'd keep doing what we normally do, and then we would come back to ideas.
And so was just sitting there one day, once again frustrated, kind of at where we were stuck with. Dan and I were tossing back and forth ideas on some tube box style ideas that we had looked at. But prior to me even getting hired, you guys had looked at potentially doing a tube for one of the other pens, and kind of set it aside because it was relatively cost prohibitive at the time. And in looking up, we looked up cast acrylic in larger sizes, and we were looking at cardboard tubes in larger sizes that this stuff would fit in, and all this stuff. It was still relatively expensive for those types of product for what we felt like we were getting.
And we were trying to source something in the United States.
Absolutely.
So our box is made a few miles down the road for our regular pens. So there's different solutions. Some stuff you could buy in large batches from overseas, but it still wasn't quite what we wanted. We wanted something that would match the aesthetic and the custom aspect of our pens, and have that kind of thing that we find important, being made in the United States. Yeah. So
as close to the shop as possible, ideally.
Yes.
Like we really enjoy working with small businesses, especially if they're in the local community, because the money that we make goes back into the community. It's just kind of one of the things that we've just always been about. And that's not to say that we're not going to ever work with anybody that's anywhere else in the world,
or that goods are from other places are bad.
Yeah, it's just we build relationships with the
right.
people that we work with, which is why we've talked about some of that in some of the prior.
I feed my family and pay my mortgage with a local business I work for, so it's important to us. So sitting there again at the computer, I frustratedly just looked up. We swivel our chairs towards each other. He's over here, I'm over here.
And so I just frustratedly was like, why can't we just get metal tube and make it out of metal tube? Because
I went, yeah, right.
Yeah, he literally was like, that's not possible. It's going to be way too expensive. The boss will never sign off on that. And I was like, why? We make this pen has relatively few metal pieces on it. We're traditionally a company that works in aluminum, brass, and copper. I'm going to look and I'm going to find a solution to this. And so
go right ahead.
And he did. And he went back to work, and then subsequently got sick and had several days off. And
so I just was gone, and I come back, and all of a sudden it's basically done.
I had the opportunity to find some pricing on stuff, and basically sat down with Bill in a meeting, and what we came up with was basically this. Now, this is 1.25" aluminum, 6061. It's the same aluminum that we use in all of our pens currently. It's just a larger diameter. And it's full rod. It's not tubing. We source it as full rod, and we basically, from the ground up, we built this tube, this pen case, this pen tube, for this item. It fits in there snugly. We sourced foam from the foam factory, which is a U.S. foam manufacturer. In the past, foam has been really cost prohibitive using foam because of the way that it's die cut, and they have to make the die specific to the foam. The foam factory is, they have some advanced techniques that they use that allowed us to get the foam really, really cheap. The prices that we didn't even a tenth of quotes that we'd gotten before, and in bulk, large quantities, and that they could do in the future if we needed more and more and more. So there's 3 pieces of custom cut foam
In every one.
In every single one of these, the top piece, the bottom piece,
and two different densities, 3 different pieces.
Yeah. So and all of that we got, like, I mean, for pennies on what you could get any other foam for.
And we sourced it here in the United States.
Yeah, I think they're back east somewhere.
Yeah.
It was here in like 7 days. And so this product is fully machined from the beginning. It's machined. The top and the bottom are machined on a CNC lathe, and then we take the top and basically engrave our logo on the top so that you know it's the top when you get it, when you order it and it shows up in the mail. The top piece is engraved on a CNC mill, and it's just kind of like it capped off the design perfectly.
And part of the joke was, back, it was a big deal to do time capsules.
Right. So I've always loved time capsules, like since I was a kid.
I love containers. Always fascinate me.
And so this is like almost like it's like a baton, but at the same time, like
it's a pen capsule.
It's a pen capsule, with the whole like history, design, technology. The elements of everything that we kind of put into this pen and we've used as taglines in advertising and social media really come together in the culmination of every single aspect of this pen. We could not make this pen if we didn't have the machines that we had. We couldn't make this pen if we didn't have Dan to design the pen. We couldn't make this pen if we didn't have a machinist who had over 2 decades worth of machining experience.
Or have another person that knows pens like Paul does.
It's really it's a labor of love from all aspects of Karas Pen Co. That does sound cheesy, but really, like this pen, I think it culminates everything that we've done in the past and really puts it into perspective, where we're taking every single machine that we have availability for that we have in shop, and we're using them all. Because there's lathes and there's lathe work on almost every single piece. There's mill work on several pieces on the box, and on the clips are all hand loaded in a mill. The clips had to be, special fixtures just to machine the clip. Special, we had to tumble the rings. We got stamped. They had to custom design and fabricate and build a small press to assemble the clips. That was done by our shop foreman. Our shop foreman sat down, Josh, and basically from scratch designed a fixturing device for those 2 pieces. So from start to finish, this pen is a pen where more than any other of our pens is made in Karas Pen Co. From the packaging, there's only 3 elements that we did not make in-house: the spring steel clip, the nib, and the converter.
And the foam.
And the foam, sure. Yes, and the foam. So 4 elements, and those are all sourced from our normal partners. So hopefully us talking you through this kind of idea process and the design process, and showing you some of these, you kind of get an idea of what we do, and sat down to do that, to give you kind of an idea on this process in the grand scope of when you sit down to do something like this. Frequently, design processes like these are 2 to 3 years in the making from when a designer initially has an idea with the company and sits down. Dan is a master, a master of working on a very tight deadline. That pen,
wait, are you saying I'm a really good procrastinator? Is that what
I don't know, but that pen, this version of the pen, the initial design of this version of the pen in this form, you drew up in January?
Something like that, yeah.
So you're looking at 8 months worth of work, and in between that time, we've...
Well, from the initial idea to 3D modeling to having this printed was a few weeks.
Yes, we had the some people at the Los Angeles Pen Show saw these. We had them with us. So there's a few people that we frequently partner with on testing our pens, that we had a couple of those, and we showed them off and got some feedback on those 3D printed versions. So within us coming back from our December holiday vacation on like the 8th of January until Valentine's Day, that was drawn up and 3D printed and ready to go. So That being said, we're going to wrap up this video. We just wanted to give you an idea on the design process and the prototyping process, and basically what we did to get to the steps of moving into actual manufacturing. So we hope that you have an better idea of how we go about our business when we sit down to prototype a pen and design a pen, and really give you an idea of that whole process. If you do have questions, comment below, hit us up. Make sure to like this video,
subscribe,
and we will see you in a few minutes with the manufacturing video.
Stay tuned.